What's a man to do when he gets abducted by otherworldly aliens and has one of their parasites planted in his head on his way home from work? Well, most people might not manage to make it back home, but this father of 6 will use his skills as a retired thief to sneak past enemies, his fatherly instincts to rescue every child along the way that he can, and of course his expertise with a blade to make it home in time for dinner. Can our hero make it back before the old lady starts calling us a deadbeat? Well, we got one way to find out. But first, the rules. No other party members, though temporary companions such as summons are a-okay. No multiclassing, no illithid powers, no karmic dice, no barrelmancy or chessmancy, no saving in the middle of combat, and this is a tactician run, so we'll be keeping it that way. With all that said, let's move on to character creation. To start, our race is gonna be a Lightfoot halfling, since this gives us advantage on stealth checks as well as the halfling luck ability letting us reroll any ones that we would get, making us much more consistent. Our class, of course, is a rogue, which doesn't get much notable at level 1 other than sneak attack letting us deal extra damage whenever we have advantage or an ally next to whoever we're targeting. Naturally, the background of choice is criminal to represent our shady history as a second story man. These are our final ability scores and skill proficiencies with an emphasis on dexterity and constitution, since dex is our main source of pretty much everything, and constitution will make sure that if we do get hit, we stay standing. Now we just need to make our daddy dearest look the part, and I say we manage it swimmingly. And last but not least, we give this paternal powerhouse a name befitting a hero. Get ready for the journey of Robert Banks. With a hankering headache, our newest hero awakens deep in enemy territory with a single goal in mind. He's got to get home ASAP, and that starts by taking control of the ship. Unfortunately, yet another alien shows up to jump us, quite literally in this case, but while we're talking with her, a group of imps show up as well to try and join the fun, so she decides to work with us. To make matters worse though, our newest ally is quite clumsy and slips her way right into the void. Well, ally or not, after coming from a house full of 6 children, a couple hellspawn really aren't difficult for us to deal with. Shortly after, we make it all the way to the helm and find, okay, this might be a little harder to deal with than unruly children. So we just run all the way to the end and fiddle around with what looks like what Mrs. Banks keeps in her bedside drawers, only for it to teleport us to safety. Thankfully, we manage to land on a beach and wake up the next day at last ready to start our journey home. But first, we find us a nice floppy hat that we just have to take with us. As we're searching for somewhere to regroup, we stumble across a group of druids being set upon by goblins, and for better or worse, Bobby Banks gets dragged into the fight. Our hero does his best to make sure the goblins get taken out before they can do too much harm, but in a rare sort of twist, it seems like we've encountered a group of people who can somewhat take care of themselves. Well, at the very least at first. However, the ones who remain are even kind enough to throw healing pots all the way over to us. With rejuvenated health, Rob's slaughter continues, but unfortunately so does the enemies. Still, before too long, we manage to clean them all up. And our reward is level 2, granting us a bit more HP as well as cunning actions, meaning we can now dash, disengage, or hide as a bonus action. These abilities might seem unassuming, but trust me when I say they are likely the best abilities we will ever get, for reasons you'll see soon. Once inside the grove, we immediately find some tiefling refugees who are less than happy and looking to abandon their fellow kin. But nothing is as important as family, so we convince them to stay and protect each other. It seems that they're not the only people ready to turn on each other, as the druids are looking to basically outright murder the tiefling refugees. So we add deeper in to give a stern talking to the temporary leader of these druids who's actively trying to kill a kid. Of course, we don't let that happen with a bit of a persuasion check, but it seems either way we gotta get rid of these goblins nearby if we want these kids to be truly safe. Speaking of kids, we find they've got a whole little thieves guild set up here, and as revenge they want to steal the druid's idol. We agree to do it on their behalf to make sure they don't get in more trouble. Well, here we also buy the hunting shortbow from Damon, a +1 shortbow that grants advantage on attacks against monstrosities and lets us cast Hunter's Mark once per long rest. It won't be our forever bow, but it's nice to have for now. Either way, first we want to learn more about these goblins, and as such we head into the wilderness. Along the way, all of a sudden a sulfuric stench overwhelms us and this waffling dandy whisks us away to literal hell. Turns out Raphael here thinks we should beg him for help with our parasite problem, but the wife wouldn't be too happy if we came home without a soul, so we tell him to bugger off. Further down the road, we also find a poor pup whose master got by the goblins, and while he isn't willing to come with us quite yet, we leave him our scent so Scratch can join us at our camp later. I get the feeling the kids will love him. Right nearby is an abandoned village infested with goblins waiting to ambush us, but their tricks are amateurish compared to ours, so we managed to get the jump on them instead. With the shortbow we picked up earlier, it's easy enough to start picking them off, especially since they're hot garbage at hitting us in return. Our ability to hide right under their noses even helps when they get too close, only for them to forget we just murdered a bunch of their friends with apparently the world's greatest persuasion check. All this nonsense grants us level 3 and our subclass of choice, Thief, which of course gives the mind-blowingly powerful and exploitable ability that is resistance to fall damage. Oh, and something else really lame like a whole second bonus action, but I mean, who needs that, am I right? Also, at every odd level, our sneak attack damage goes up by a d6. Elsewhere in town, we find yet more goblin thugs who've tied up some poor defenseless whippersnapper. And like their brethren nearby, a bit of charisma applied in the right spot works better than any dagger in the dark ever would, letting us free the wayward wanderer, a fellow by the name of Barkus Root, and send him on his merry way. As a reward for our good deeds, our newest canine companion joins us in camp to keep us company for the long walk home. Regardless, our hunt for the Goblin HQ continues and we come across a checkpoint in the road. Since we managed to talk to the last couple groups of them, we figure we'll give it a whirl here too. And well, the price of admission is a little steeper than we'd like to pay, but we're more than willing to give them a taste of their own medicine. When the inevitable fight kicks off, we throw a literal boulder at their heads just in case the warg dung wasn't enough. Then we use both of our bonus actions to dash all the way up to the high ground. The gruesome goblins, meanwhile, wish they could dash half as good as us, but instead spend their whole turns doing it, leaving us to use a well-placed fire arrow to take out another of the horde while breaking the drum that would call their allies. Followed by one of the goblins having enough of our BS, but hey, at least the resistance to fall damage is coming in handy. Either way, it's easy to get back up and away from the wargs with a couple dashes, teach the goblins that they should really treat people the way they want people to treat them, and then riddle them all with arrows while they stand helplessly on the low ground, making sure to hide before each attack for advantage and sneak attack damage. As we finally get to the goblin camp, we get struck by a killer headache and a mysterious voice floods our mind to show off a bunch of silhouettes, the apparent leaders of the cult of the Absolute to which the goblins are loyal. Thankfully, this young lady shows up to scare away the visions, but she's also rather insistent we take her with us. However, this journey is not for youngins like her, so we tell her to clear off. Once inside the camp proper, we spot a boisterous goblin with a fancy-looking toe ring that upon seeing our kleptomaniac instincts kick in. And then Crusher makes the mistake of saying this.
Kiss more foot.
So we do what we gotta do and use the old sleight of tongue that led to Bobby Banks being a father of 6 in the first place. This time, however, it just leads to us getting Crusher's ring for an extra 3 meters of move speed, making us significantly more mobile, which is incredibly handy. Afterwards, we chat with the first of 3 goblin leaders, Priestess Gut, who thinks we're a fellow true soul and wants to talk to us in private about our parasite, only for her to end up drugging our regretful rogue with a potion of sleep, and when we awake, we're bound hand and foot with no hope of escaping. Conveniently enough though, an assassin apparates out of literally thin air in order to kill our temporary captor. It seems she was sent by the Honorable Raphael, who's keeping an eye on us, but that's a problem for a later day. Now that we're free, we find a hidden route in the back of Gut's chambers with a truly impressively large ladder leading all the way to the Underdark, which is chock full of murderous minotaurs to shoot, radiant rocks to destroy, singing swords to collect, and magnificent myconids to befriend, all right by the entrance. We don't intend to spend too much time here as we'd like to deal with the goblins sooner than later, but while we're here, we pick up the Caustic band from Dareth Bonecloak. This little trinket won't be on us for long, but while it is, we'll be dealing 2 extra acid damage with all of our weapon attacks. Speaking of little trinkets, we also grab a nice pair of boots from this deep gnome after curing her poison with an antidote. Turns out she nabbed them from some Dwergar slavers across the lake who've got her kin captured, and knowing how important family is, we agree to help save them as soon as we can. First, however, we stumble across a body holding the Shortsword of First Blood, which deals an extra 1d8 damage to any full health enemies we hit with it, hopefully working with our sneak attack to one-shot most low-level foes. Since we've got a bit more power, we take a look around the goblin camp a bit further and find they've got the legendary author Volothamp imprisoned here. Our fancy new sword is more than enough to clear out the guard and let us free Volo lickety-split, just to get caught in the process by another nosy ne'er-do-well. Ah well, we're still shaking off the rust a little. With that little pit stop back at the camp done, we're feeling pretty good about being able to take out the goblin leaders. But before that, we decide to steal the idol at the grove and, well, looking for something to distract them, find evidence that Kaga may be more than she appears. To confirm our suspicions, we head to the nearby swamp and find this too is more than it appears, as an illusion coats the entire place. Either way, this gives us level 4 and our first feat, for which we take Mobile. This bad boy grants us an extra 3 meters of move speed, lets us ignore difficult terrain when we dash, and most importantly, if we make a melee attack against an enemy, they don't get to make opportunity attacks against us for the rest of the turn, letting us, as the name suggests, be rather mobile with hit and run tactics. The search continues deeper in the swamp, where we sneak up on a whole bunch of elementals to grab the damning evidence against Kaga. Unfortunately, this reveals us to them, but that's why we always pack an extra invis potion in our work kit. Sure enough, the letter proves that Kaga was working with a bunch of evil druids this whole time. Now we just have to confront her. Unfortunately, when we do, the shadow druids show up to fight alongside her, and so a fight kicks off. We're in quite the pickle at the start, so we disengage and hide behind a wall so that the lone good druid in the room takes the brunt of the fight, and boy does he ever. Now that we're in a better position, we can just stab whoever is closest and use our bonus actions to dash as far as we possibly can. Our foes get a little sidetracked while chasing us and decide to take out their rage on Nettie, which, I mean, yeah, fair enough, have you met her? It doesn't change the game plan of poking them for a bit of damage and running away, but they are druids, so they have a metric buttload of HP at their disposal, whether through healing or wild shape. Either way, they can't keep up with us as we kite them around the arena. Oftentimes, they don't even bother moving. And while it does take a small eternity, we do eventually end up killing both Kaga and her cronies with a whole bunch of arrows and even more patience. Off the head honcho's corpse, we get Broodmother's Revenge, an amulet that makes it so whenever we heal, our weapons deal 1d6 extra poison damage for the next few turns. This also triggers off of potions, and with our extra bonus action, it's nice and easy to have this active as much as we'd like. Continuing on, since the folks here won't need their idol anymore, we also finally yoink that with the help of a darkness arrow and make good on our promise to give it to the little tiefling scamps. At last, it's time to take out the remaining goblin leaders, but to make sure no one can call for help, we first start by stealthily destroying all the various war drums about. Then we wait for Minthara to start crossing this rickety bridge and shoot it right out from under her, and no one even saw us coming. Afterwards, with just one leader left, we start cleaning house with all the stragglers and isolated goblins, until eventually we get caught in a proper scuffle. But with a strength elixir and all of our other damage boosts, these lowly goblins don't stand a chance at all. Let's find out if Dror Ragzlin himself, the sole remaining leader, has any more of an oomph to him. Starting on the high ground means we're easily able to start taking folks out and skedaddling away with no real chance of retaliation, since the enemies have to dash to catch up to us. The exception, of course, is the big man, who's got a hell of a throwing arm, but not enough that we need to worry. For the first few rounds, we keep thinning down the turn order as much as we possibly can and get the odd heavy hit in on the heavy hitter himself. Right up until he gets a little too close for comfort, which is when we drop a fog cloud using a scroll, which when hidden in has the fun effect of making enemies completely skip their turns, since they can't target you because they can't see you, nor can they search for you since your last known location is also obscured, meaning we get to use our action to shoot whoever we want, then one of our bonus actions to hide inside the fog cloud, causing them to skip their turns all over again. Rinse and repeat for a while, and the poor goblin camp gets to find out why the law was so grateful when old Bobby Banks retired. Once the goblins are all cleared out, we return to the tieflings to tell them the good news and send them back on the road. The next day, Halsin, the true leader of the grove who was being held prisoner by the goblins, shows up to have a chat with us. He mentions the cult is currently headquartered in a place called Moonrise Towers in the Shadow Curse lands, and he'd love to join us on our way way there. But before we can head there, we head to the mountain pass along the way to scout out the situation. And along the way, we encounter Lady Esther, who tells us in the nearby monastery there are a bunch of Gith, and she tries to convince us to steal one of their unborn children. When we tell her we think kidnapping is more than a little messed up, she tries to outright murder us, which, as you'd imagine, does not end up going well for her. From her corpse, we pick up the Graceful Cloth, which grants advantage on all dex checks, increases our dex by 2 up to 19, increases our jump distance, and boosts our dex saves by 1 as well. Since this is clothing, we can also throw on the Bracers of Defense that we picked up at the Blighted Village earlier, granting a +2 to our AC. A bit further down, as we approach the nearby monastery, we find a hidden entrance into the Gith Creche. With a couple of well-placed jumps, we manage to stealth our way past the guards, and once inside the Creche proper, no one really questions why or how we got in here. Either way, we have a quick chat with a Jacqueline Gira and buy the Knife of the Undermountain King. This +2 Shortsword will be our offhand weapon and expands our crit range by 1, letting us crit on a 19 or higher, and also makes it so when we roll a 2 or less on a damage die, it re-rolls it and takes the higher result, basically drastically increasing our average damage roll. It's clear the Gith are dangerous and have answers, but we'll need to de-rest a bit more before we talk to their leaders, just in case. So we head upstairs and get inspecting the place when we get into a scuffle with some kobolds. It's relatively easy for us to use the old Cunning action Hide into Sneak Attack to deal good damage to whoever's closest, followed by using a Cunning action Dash to kite them away, resulting of course in them wasting their whole action to keep up with us. And while there are a whole lot of them, with our new and improved damage, they mostly get one shot, so the killer kobolds get killed themselves before they can do a thing. Once they're all out of the way, we head upstairs even further and stumble across a whole bunch of Gramishkas. This fight is relatively similar to the last one, as Rob's old skills and routines are all flooding back to him. After all, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can, however, have that dog hone his tricks by reaching level 5, bumping our sneak attack damage up to 3d6, our proficiency bonus up to +3, and granting uncanny dodge. This sweet little ability is a passive that, so long as it's on, will automatically use our reaction to have the first instance of damage that we take. Why this isn't just a regular reaction, I could never tell you. Now that we're feeling sufficiently de-rusted, the first thing on our to-do list is investigating what exactly is going on in this swamp. Very quickly, we stumble across a cabin with a clearly distressed pregnant girl being held hostage by an old lady named Ethel. Bobby Banks is not one to let a young whippersnapper get caught up in this sort of trouble, but when we try and intervene, Ethel magically teleports her away and reveals herself as a hideous hag. Unfortunately, at the same moment, she also summons a small host of repugnant redcaps. We start our fight against them by using Hunter's Mark on the lead one and then getting them good with our First Blood sword, before dashing at full speed back into the more open wilderness. They've got other plans for us though, and hit us with a hold person. This causes us to skip our next turn, but we break free before any real harm can come to us. Instead, the real harm comes to us right after we break free. So with no real choice, on our next turn we disengage and dash and throw down a healing pot to fix ourselves up, which aggroes someone else on the other end of the swamp. Thankfully, this next round we save against the only attack that comes against us. And now that we're relatively far, we can use a bonus action to hide in order to sneak attack afterwards, and our second bonus action to dash and kite as per usual. A lightning arrow on our next turn finishes off the first of them and severely weakens another before we dash out onto the balcony preparing to jump off. Sure enough, the plan works perfectly, and it's clear that we can make a repeating loop to kite them forever. Only problem is this bumbling bozo who tries to throw a wrench in our plans, but luckily we make the save, and on following turns get to work on making sure he can't do that again. With a few more lucky saves, some incredibly well-placed arrows, and of course a bit of expert stealth work, this fight is wrapped up lickety-split. As we get looking for where the girl Marina got sent, we find a hidden staircase leading underground. When we head down, Ethel immediately gives a rather unexpected compliment, but we tell her that alas, we're already taken, causing her to immediately leave in shame. Further down, we find more unsuspecting thralls of hers that unfortunately need to be cleared out, but they go down nice and easy all the same. At the very bottom, we find a seemingly unguarded Marina, but we're not nearly that naive, so we pop an invis pot, hit the switch to lower her cage, and fire off a darkness arrow in a convenient spot. Then to kick things off, we throw Alchemist Fire where Ethel is most likely hiding. This uses up our action, but we don't want to be left without any darkness clouds to hide in, so we use a speed potion to fire another one. Our swamp-dwelling opponent splits off into a bunch of copies, but none of them can actually do anything to us so long as we're hiding in a darkness cloud, meaning they just pass their turns. Well, Rob gets to pop out of the cloud and shoot the real Ethel turn after turn. All we gotta do is keep on top of the darkness arrows to make sure we don't run out. Soon enough, we knock her below 30 HP, causing her to surrender on her turn and beg for her life. She says if we let her leave with Marina, she'll give us power, but Bobby Banks is never one to let a lost lamb stray too far from the herd, so we intimidate Ethel into giving us both the girl and the power, resulting in another +1 to Dex for a total of 20. Marina is not so enthusiastic about what just went down, blaming us for the deal being broken, but she was gonna sacrifice her child in order to bring back her dead husband, so we probably did her a favor. Next on our list of whippersnappers to save are the deep gnomes in the Underdark. Thankfully, Sovereign Glut here also doesn't like the Dwergar slavers much and agrees to join us. He even brings a little fungal zombie pal with him. Sure enough, just nearby are a bunch of Dwergar on the beach waiting for unsuspecting victims, but we get the jump on them first. Thanks to a surprise round, we even manage to take one out before they ever get a turn. The first of these dastardly dwarves starts laying into our cannon fodder, but the boss man decides to raise a whole bunch of cannon fodder himself. Glut's reanimated pal gets to wallop out his revenge on his turn, while Glut himself tries to deal with the sudden undead apocalypse that we're facing. Thankfully, zombies aren't known for their accuracy. On our turn, we continue to soften up the enemy archer and run up this hill to ensure we don't get surrounded. At this point, our side faces its first casualty as dead Dwergar gets obliterated by a lightning arrow and Glut starts to take some brutal blows of his own. Now, we're too far to deal damage to the actual enemies, so we're left just poking at the zombie horde and staying out of harm's way. Our fungal fella follower didn't get the same memo though and follows his reanimated underling to the afterlife. We're left alone and leading a trailing horde of zombies chasing us up a hill as we slowly pick them off one by one. Once most of them are out of the way, we rain down arrow after arrow on the sole Dwergar who actually somewhat kept up with us, but he doesn't last long either. The remaining two are kind enough to come at us one by one as well, which means they get taken out one by one until all of them are cleared out. We tell Sovereign Spa back at the colony the good news, and he tells us there's still an absolute cultist named Nier across the lake that he wants dead, and if he's the captor of the deep gnomes, then so do we. But he also rewards us with bliss spores to help out, granting us an extra 1d6 to all of our rolls until we long rest, which won't be for a very long while, so keep this in mind. Then at last, we get sailing across the lake to rescue the deep gnomes, happy to save another family, even if it means a bit longer till we see our own. Upon arriving, they mistake us for a cultist ourselves, and it seems tensions are quite dang high, not to mention Nier has trapped himself in a cave-in. A quick chat with Elder Brithvar here reveals that Nier has yet to pay them, so he proposes we help free the twat soul, his words not mine, in order to murder him and take the coin off his corpse. Naturally we agree, but first we need to make sure the Absolute has no eyes on this place, and that means assassinating the scrying eye wandering about while no one is looking. With that out of the way, we then blow up the cave-in and out comes the man of the hour, Nier, immediately yeeting one of the people we came to save. Well, we just kind of stare at him, I guess. Regardless, it's time to get revenge with plenty of Dwergar on our side. Bobby immediately starts laying into whoever is closest, but when the turn passes to Nier, he uses a domination ability to mind control one of our posse. At least his posse aren't very effective with their regular hits. Some do have mind control of their own though. Our allies manage to break out of it decently quickly at least, even if they just end up getting recaptured right afterwards. As we're debating what to do on our next turn, a couple more allies join the fight on our side, making this even easier, especially when we're able to help free one of our dominated Dwergar. The mosh pit begins in proper at this point with arrows flying everywhere, folks hacking away with axes, bashing away with swords, you name it. First blood, however, as expected, goes to old Rob Banks, followed by a solid attempt from one of the thugs on our side to shove Nier into the lava. Unfortunately for them, what goes around comes around, and they're not quite as muscular. Nor is the next person who tries, or the one after that for that matter. Either way, it's immediately apparent our foes are outnumbered and outgunned, leading to them dropping like flies the second this fight starts tilting in our favor. Nier isn't even the last to fall, that honor goes to one of his goons. Afterwards, the remaining dwarves try and take the deep gnomes with them, but you already know we are not standing for that. We even encounter our old friend Barkus Root here, who's chasing after a buddy of his trapped in Moonrise, and since we're headed in the same direction, he agrees to join us at our camp. Continuing on to make sure we're fully prepared for our chat with the Gith, we first scour the surrounding areas to see if there's anything else that can help us, and we stumble across a buttload of gnolls and hyenas fighting some folks trapped in the cave. Since we managed to get a surprise round on them, it's easy pickings at the start of the fight, and with our Hunter's Mark, Sneak Attack, and Elixir of the Colossus for an extra d4, and a Fire Arrow, we start dealing some really heavy hits. It certainly doesn't hurt that we get 3 crits in a row either. Well, it doesn't hurt us at least. Our enemies, however, don't stand a fraction of a chance against us, and are all cleaned up using our usual kiting strats to avoid damage. The folks we saved are more than happy to see us, and as it turns out are in the same line of business we used to be in. They recognize the type of fellow we are and invite us back to their hideout. We make a quick pit stop to get a reward for saving them, but figure our old lady would be fuming if we're spending too much time with old associates, so we get moving on. Back at the Creche at last, and we notice a whole bunch of ceremonial weapons scattered about this place, and our old instincts start telling us they're important. One of them is being held by some giant territorial eagles, but nothing that we can't nab with a good bit of sneaking and some fast hands. At the top of the temple, there's a few altars for us to put the missing ceremonial weapons, and upon putting them in place, we gain Morning Lord's Radiance, a buff that grants an extra d4 radiant damage to our attacks until long rest, which as mentioned will be quite a while from now. With nothing more to find, we at last head down to the Creche proper to see if we can get some answers from these Gith. Seems they're terribly interested in this artifact that popped up in our bag one evening, but it would much rather stick with us, so we get sent to talk to the boss man, who's more than a little intense. Far more intense than him is the evil Lich God Queen that shows up half a second later. We remember our manners and say hello just in time. Still, Vlaakith here wants us to head inside the prism and kill whoever we find inside. Not wanting to get smited, smitten, whatever it is, we acquiesce. Once inside, we meet the voice in our head who's been talking to us this whole time and visiting our dreams on the odd occasion where we actually sleep. She reveals that she's been protecting us this whole time from turning into a mind flare using some power that Vlaakith also wants. And since we'd rather not come back to the family as a 6-foot-tall levitating squid, we agree to let our guardian live. She does at least give us a bless that also lasts until our next long rest, joining our ever-growing pile of buffs alongside a mage armor scroll to increase our AC to 20 since we're just wearing clothing. The second we step outside, we enter turn-based mode, drink a health pot to trigger our amulet, use a greater invisibility scroll, and start spamming arrows as much as we can. Their ready to parry feature drastically reduces our damage output though, and even though our invisibility doesn't break, they still somehow drag us into combat. So naturally we get stabbing their boss the old-fashioned way. When they fail to spot us, however, cause we're invisible, initiative breaks, only for it to start up again when we stab him despite still being invisible. I don't really understand why, but either way we get a couple more good pokes in, and on the last our invisibility finally breaks and the fight starts properly. As the rounds go by, we get shot by a crossbowman and brain blasted a couple times, but we make it out relatively healthy. That is, until we trigger an opportunity attack and almost die. Our biggest healing pot gets used up fixing this, and we just barely fall short of one-shotting one of the goons. Then a bonus action dash lets us move as far as we possibly can away, hoping to kite them. Unfortunately, in addition to having a +13 hit with high ground, they also have the ability to Misty Step, effectively making some damage unavoidable. At the very least, Will Wargaz himself seems to forget this and wastes his turn dashing while we continue to get pelted by the Ardents. If there ever was a time to take a speed pot, it's now. We use our overwhelming speed to run up and offhand attack the weak Ardent to finish them off. Then we use one action to dash, our second action to heal up using a potion, and move all the way to the opposite end of the chamber. Even with their dashes and teleports, they still just barely manage to reach us. On our turn, to prevent an opportunity attack, we offhand hit Will Wargaz, move out of their vision cones to hide, and use a sneak attack acid arrow on the crossbowman, before once again bolting to the other side of the room. We get pelted by our target in turn, but everyone else is just dashing about. A well-placed arrow of our own has our worst problem solved, and now we can dash out of the room to try and kite, heal up using our steady supply of potions, and refresh our speed pot before it wears out. We're not quite able to take out the remaining Ardent in one sneak attack on our next turn, so we use 2 dashes to get all the way back into the corner. But no matter how far you go, a Githyanki warrior will always be able to catch up to you if they put their mind to it. Thankfully, with the mobile feat, another stab prevents opportunity attacks, letting us run up to the Ardent and finish them off. To add to our good fortune, neither of our remaining foes decides to corner us this round, which means we get to use 1 attack to get rid of Wargaz's parry, and after hiding, another sneak attack crit obliterates most of his remaining health. A bit more kiting and another couple arrows on the next round is all it takes to finish the Inquisitor. It was hard fought indeed, but Bobby Banks has a family and a warm dinner to get back to. During the fight, we noticed the signs of a hidden passageway in the back of the room. Not wanting to fight through the rest of the Creche, we head through it and escape to safety. There's nothing left to do now but head to the Shadowcurse lands, where there will no doubt be more youngins to save, shadows to hide in, and maybe even the strongest possible item that a thief could hope to find. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the start of Bobby Banks' adventure. If you can't wait for more Truant content, join the live streams every Sunday and Monday right here on YouTube. And as always, a special thanks to our Storyteller tier members, Bunny Warren, Damon, Shirtles, Mark Rainbow, Vivian, Garrett Sapp, Rat King, Lovely Velvet, Apricot Antlers, Beltfed Joe, Lumina, Chance Hine, Game Life Coaching, El Guardia, Cluck Vader, and Cody Lumi.